You're listening to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. I'm your host, Jay Pryor. This isn't your usual gender reveal party. There will be no baby sex parts. This is the real reveal, where we reveal gender through stories of brave humans willing to share their lived experience. Enjoy the listening. I sure enjoy making it. So I know I've heard you on all kinds of things. So on this podcast, we just mostly talk about being queer and unpacking gender in a powerful way. So your contribution with All Boys Aren't Blue is obviously huge in that arena, but it's also 2020 for you, right? So I'm thinking we have some other things to talk about, maybe. So I'd just love to hear your story and what you're up to and, what you're doing then and now and that kind of stuff. So that's basically, I'm just going to give you the stage to share your work with us.
All Boys Aren't Blue came out in 2020 at the height of the pandemic.
It sure did. Wait, hold on. Let me do a intro and say welcome to the Gender Reveal Party for everybody, because we're having a conversation here with George M. Johnson, and I'm so excited to have you here. And you're about to just say that your book, Boys Aren't Blue, came out in 2020 in the height of the pandemic.
Yes, All Boys Aren't Blue came out April 28th of 2020, right at the height of the pandemic.
A month after we locked down.
No bookstores open when it came out, so we didn't know what was going to happen with it. Fortunately, though, it did really well its first couple of weeks, and then during Pride Month, it was optioned by Gabrielle Union for television, and then it made a lot of the top lists of the summer reads. And so it did extremely well. For about 17 months, it was just doing what books do, and it was still being picked up every week moderately. And I had already started working on the second book called We Are Not Broken. Things were rolling and things were going pretty good. And then let me see, that was 2020. It's funny because the years start to run into each other.
Right. Especially with the pandemic, I think everything kind of got smashed.
Everything kind of smashed a couple years. Each other, right? Yeah. So then I believe it was September of 2021. Yeah, that was when We Are Not Broken came out. I'm like, I feel like my years are a little confused. Like, am I off?
I do that myself.
I know. I'm like, wait a minute.
Well, it's hard when you write a book too, because like I birthed my book. I birthed my show in 2018. Yeah. And then it was like 2019 before I showed anybody. It's just like, I don't. And then 2020 happened. I don't even know.
Yeah. So
I'm with you on that. I don't know.
And it's funny. I think now I'm just connecting the dots, and it's like, so my second book came out right as All Boys Aren't Blue was starting to be banned. And I guess I never even connected the dots that I was simultaneously doing both things.
Right.
And so then the book started to be banned. Last September was end of September, beginning of October. And that has now snowballed into where it has become the third most challenged book in the United States, second most banned book in the United States right now, and probably creeping towards number one this year as they're relentless against me. But, it hasn't stopped the work that I do. I still freelance write from time to time. We were able to create a really, really powerful dramatic reading based off the book that won a GLAAD Award and several other major honors. We, again, still developing the television show. I've been attached to some other projects that I can't speak about yet, but that'll be also around queer identity and LGBTQ culture, specifically Black queer culture. That'll be announced in the upcoming weeks. I'm constantly writing, constantly working, constantly trying to figure out new ways of telling our story.
Yeah. Can we get, I don't know if you know that I'm a life coach, and that's a lot of what I do is have people take a moment. Can you get present for a second to the impact you've had? Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Could you ever imagine? And I would assert the banning is probably, are people buying more books now that they're banned? Because I hope so. That's what I'm hoping that's having people buy it more.
Yeah, I saw a huge increase in sales and visibility. Some of the books haven't gotten as much support as mine has, which is unfortunate. But right. I also, part of why my book had such an increase was because I decided to take on the challenges publicly in a very vocal way. So it did put me out there differently than it did other authors. But yeah, it hit the New York Times bestseller list. That was back in February, still selling very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the impact, it's interesting when you put something into the world and then it starts to shift culture and you're like living in the midst of the cultural shift that's happening. I think oftentimes as writers, we don't always live in the shift happening. A lot of the shift happens posthumously for writers.
Absolutely.
Where they work
Usually.
30, 40 years
Right.
later,
Yeah,
have such a big
absolutely.
impact on something in the world. I'm actually living through it. So it has been interesting trying to process the fact that I'm having such an impact on the world, but that I'm also still here to see it, and that I also still have to be the person who as who I am. But I'm definitely starting to process it a lot more as laws are coming out, and I'm watching governors and senators publicly talk about the book and publicly talk about queerness and how to remove the rights and all of those things happening in real time while I'm fighting against it. So yeah, I definitely feel the impact now much more than I probably have before.
Do you have opportunity to have young people and people who are impacted by the book who've made a big difference in their lives? Do you get access to that? Because that's the impact I really hope that you're hearing, as opposed from the those who are against us. I do my best to tune them out because I've been doing this for 35 years. So I'm like, oh my, we just got to tune those people out and focus. What I always focus on are the young people and the people that I hear from that are trans kids who've told me things like, you're the only old trans guy I know, right?
Yeah.
And this is, I know what they're saying. You're the only older person that looks like me that has a life, right? That I can identify with. That's not in a gutter or on a show. I mean, it's important. So I hope that you hear. Do you hear from the kids and from the people that you're making a difference with?
Yeah, all the time, every day, whether it's through email, whether it's through direct messages. I hear from the kids, I hear from the librarians, I hear from the teachers, I hear from the parents, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. I hear from
the parents,
from everyone.
Yeah.
So it is a really beautiful thing that I do get to tune out the noise with all of the with all of the joy that the book has brought, with all of the awakening and the healing that the book has brought so many people. So yeah, I'm very, very fortunate. And I'm actually pretty connected to a lot of the banned book clubs that the students have started. So I do school visits still.
That's great.
College visits. Yeah, I'm very, very active in making sure that because it's not even so much of me having access to them, it's more making sure that they have access to me.
Absolutely.
And so I try my best, even within my schedule, being what my schedule looks like, to make sure that I am still doing certain events and showing up in certain places where I know they need to hear me the most.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been really, really great to see the comments, the praise and the healing happening in real time with people, and then being able to express that to me.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but for me, I've always been like I grew up as a suicidal queer youth way back in the 70s, 80s. And my whole thing has always been, I think I lived through that so that other kids don't have to do it as deep. Like I just don't want them to have to go through all that, right?
And that's really the reality of why I wrote the book. I didn't want queer teens to feel like I felt in high school and in college, and I wanted them to know that somebody not only existed in the world that's like them, but that I've already been through many of those things, so that and I want to give you a roadmap so that you don't have to go through some of the things I went through.
Right. Yeah. And I think, one of the things that historically we see, and you're right, a lot of times artists die before we really see the impact of their work. You never know what will happen, because what's always fascinating to me is I feel like I've been doing this forever and I surround myself with all these people. So, we're all on the same page. Right? And then I go speak somewhere in a small town. I'm like, oh shit. We're like way not on the same page.
Yeah,
right. And it blows my mind still how far back, like in my mind, it seems like a backwardsness, almost like a far backness that people are. And so it's a constant, never ending changing. So you never know how long it takes to shift that. And, isn't it always artists leading the way? And
Yeah.
it really is. It's always the creatives who are bold enough and brilliant enough to be able to create. And this is one of the things I really want to acknowledge you for is this: you create these conversations, right, where people are up in the experience and they're up in it, and they don't that's not theirs, right? For some people it is, and that's really healing. But even for those of us, it's not our lived experience, right? You're giving us a window.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. I'm a Glisten volunteer, and one of the things, most powerful things I think they talk about is how kids need a window and they need a mirror, right? And we provide that mirror for those queer kids, but they also, then you provide a window. And I often provide a window into straight people's lives. Like, look, we're real.
Yeah. Yeah.
These trans kids just didn't pop up out of nowhere.
Right. Right.
That's really, they really do think that just, it's like, actually, I just heard a theory that's horrifying, which is some like theory about trans kids getting addicted to then being trans on the internet or something, and that's why there's so many of them. Or I don't know, it's just crazy. But we've
Yeah.
always been here, and you give such a beautiful example of that. Tell us about, like, as you were coming to share this work. How did you choose what to share? How did you, was it linear? Was it like, because for me it's all over the place, and then I got to figure out how to put it together.
Yeah. Um, that was a tough part. I mean, it wasn't tough, but it was like I knew the story couldn't be like strictly linear. Like we did the best we could to kind of make it chronological, but I knew that some of those chapters would need to expand into parts of my adulthood because of how certain things that happened from my teen years and me being a youth played out into adulthood.
Right.
But I think overall, for me, it was choosing choosing the stories that I knew would be most relevant to helping, because it wasn't an issue of transparency. Like I knew I was going to be transparent whatever story I told or whichever stories I chose to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a matter of making sure that the stories were cohesive and that they made sense and that they went together and they had like some type of through line that a teen reader could follow. When going through it to get from the beginning, like this is where we started, this is our middle, this is the end. And so story selection wasn't super tough, but I think how do we place these chapters? How do we make this all make sense together as like a cohesive book so it doesn't, because it is a book of essays technically,
Right.
but it does read well together as a novel, despite it being more essay style of writing. And so, yeah, I think for me, it was really just choosing the best, like the stories that I knew would have the most impact. Because I have a lot of stories,
Right.
right? But for this book was very specific with a goal, and so I needed to choose the stories that would have the best impact of achieving the goal.
Yeah. Got it. And then your next book, We Are Not Broken, is a novel.
It is.
Yes. Right. I just started that, and first of all, I'm very grateful because I haven't been able to read in a while.
Yeah.
Like I've just been blocked from reading. I don't know what, but I haven't been able to read. And I started, but I started that book, and it's got me already in there. So I'm like, thank you for that. I really appreciate it right from the very get go. And one of the things that I think is important that I would love to have you highlight, because one of the things that I think my goal here is always to unpack gender, right? And so your pronouns are they, them, yes, still?
Yes.
Okay. Because we move. I've moved all over the place. So so I just want to double check.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful things about your I would say your second big book is your highlight of your nanny.
Yeah.
And how important Black women are, and this world. And I wish I'd have brought it up, your actual quote, where it's like Black women are always seen to serve others, and it's like that's just who they are.
Yeah.
And often most likely at the expense of themselves.
Yeah. When I was talking about my grandmother, realistically, that's one of the things I often think about. She gave so much of herself that it really wasn't much left for her. to be her oftentimes. And yeah, so that book definitely, it centers her and it centers her wisdoms and everything. It's, paying homage to Black grandmothers, Black mothers, Black women, through the eyes of these four Black boys, myself, my brother, my two cousins, Raul and Rasul. And I thought it was important that we start to tell that story of the Black family dynamic and how Black women specifically had to really keep the Black family unit together throughout the HIV epidemic, throughout the crack epidemic, and throughout mass incarceration, which were all happening simultaneously. Like they were all literally happening at the same time. And so, yeah, that book, I always say, like, Always on Blue is like the micro, whereas We're Not Broken is the macro,
Yeah.
Of my story. And so the two books together, I think, give you the total picture of like what the dynamic of a lived experience is. But yeah, I just felt it was extremely important to highlight the fact that Black women often step up or often show up when no one else does. And
Yeah.
for me, the Black women are still there every day. My aunts and my mom, we have a group text and we talk every day. And so they're always my biggest cheerleaders and biggest fans, and the people who I can always go to when the world is against me.
Yeah. And I have a lot of friends who have experienced, because if you take our world, you're in Plainfield, New Jersey. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, and I know other people who grew up, because I'm from Kansas in that rural area. I know a lot of queers who grew up in rural Kansas and everywhere from trailer parks to small towns to farms. And a lot of them, unlike me, their trauma has to do with violence, queerness, all kinds of stuff out, addiction, everything, just like mine. And they have they have something missing that I had, which was a strong family. Like I had a really strong connection to my family, and my family's huge. And I've noticed for me with all people that if there's this at least one strong person, right, that is for us, it's a part of what for me kept us, I think, kept us alive, but also then allows us to thrive.
Yeah.
Because I think so many people get caught up in that trauma drama like we did, or like we all did, right? Had to go, we went through some experiences, obviously.
Yeah.
And that if they don't have somebody strong that loves them, that's an anchor, it's like they can flail around for
Yeah.
a long, long time, you know.
Yeah.
Can you speak to family that way and tell me about that in terms of your experience with them as an anchor for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the book I said, like even when I didn't have a place to fit in society, I always had a place to call home. Um, and that still rings true to this day. My whole family still lives in Plainfield. I visit them multiple times a year and see them multiple times a year. Um, but yeah, they are the anchor, and for me, because they're the one constant, like friends can come and go, relationships can come and go, but my family has never left me. They have been there from the very beginning. They will be there until the very end. And it was important having that growing up, knowing that I always had a place to call home, knowing that I always had a place to go back to should I make missteps or should I falter. I mean, even to this day, if I had some huge misstep and couldn't afford the life that I live now anymore, I could always go back to my mom and dad's house and sleep in my old bedroom. Like that's just the fact of the situation. And knowing that I have that, it allows you to navigate life differently. It allows you to take risks. It allows you to explore and expand on the things that you may want to do. When you don't have that type of support, it can, you feel like you can't move, right? You feel like you have to stay in like this one space out of safety and out of
Yeah.
survival.
Right.
But when you have that type of support, you get to move differently in this world. You get to navigate this world a lot differently. you have the space to be who you are, and you don't have to make as many mistakes and missteps, because you know that you have people who you can always go to. And so, yeah, family to me means everything, because, you know, they are the one constant in my life, that isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, agree. And they're, for me, they're, and for people who I know that don't have a safe place at home, they have a real hard time with that, with having roots, right? It's like
Yeah.
that's not only is that from, I mean, energetically, that's your root chakra is where your family, that's it's your root, that's where you're going to be
Yeah.
rooted. But it's also like just this foundation, which queer people then, have been historically rejected by their family. I have friends who have been sent to aversion therapy by their family. There's all, and then so we have this. A lot of us have a chosen family, and a lot of queer people have a chosen family. And one of the things they talk about in these days is that, and I think Glisson trains this way too, is that one positive adult can make the difference in a queer kid's life that doesn't have a strong family and might be a queer kid, trying to figure stuff out. So I don't know if I just wanted to say that out loud because I want our listeners to always know that, one person can make a huge difference for these kids. Because boy, does it seem like sometimes it seems like it's unraveling out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we all know the power of one person changing people's lives. I mean, I think, even through books, like if you have that one author who wrote the thing that you needed that day that saved you or that
Yeah.
healed you.
Yeah.
But sometimes we know that it's people that you may not even know who
Right.
can be that one person for you that does that thing. And I know I'm probably that one person for a lot of people.
Yes, you
A
are.
lot of people watch me, and they watch every time I get a new deal, every time I do something big in community, every time I win an award, and every time I, create something new that helps people. They see it, and it makes them want to be better. It makes them want to be greater. It makes them want to go for their goals too. And so I do know the impact of having that one person that you look up to. Yeah, that one person that you can always look up to.
Mm-hmm. And that, just like you said, you can move differently through the world if you got an anchor or somebody that's always going to accept you and love you for just your goofy self.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about right now. You mentioned you do have a few projects going on that you can't talk about. Do you find as an artist, like, are you excited about continuing to stay with the Boys Aren't Blue TV version? Or as an artist, for me sometimes, and granted I'm like a Gemini, so maybe it's part of that, but like I'll do something, I'm like, there's my art, now I'm going to hang it up, and now I'm going to go do something else. I'm bored, I want to do, like, I just,
Yeah.
is it hard for you to stick with this? Are you having fun? Are you, what do you, are you enjoying your art? Are you doing something else? What's going on with you today and in almost 2023? I mean,
Yeah.
it's fast.
Yeah, no, I enjoy seeing my projects all the way through. It's been a long journey with All Boys on Blue, but it's really just starting. And
Right.
so, I don't look at it as like, oh my God, it's already been almost 3 years of this. Like, it's
Right.
time to move on. And I have those feelings some days where we wake up and I'm like, am I still talking about All Boys on Blue? Gee.
Wait till you've been
But
doing it for 30 years and then
yeah, like, but it's like, I look back and I'm like, yeah, but you got to remember, like, my community still talks about James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son, and we still talk about Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye and Beloved, right? So it's like, you know what, like, that's okay. Like, it's
yeah.
okay that this thing is going to be your even if it's the biggest moment I ever have. I don't think it is, but even if that is how it played out, that's okay. Like, that is okay that you did something, that you put something in the world that was that impactful and created that much change, and that you get to talk about it forever. There's nothing wrong with that. And so
No,
I feel
there's
like
not.
capitalism, consumerism is what is the pressure that feels like you have to move on.
Yeah.
But I had to really just sit with it and realize, like, that those were outside forces telling me that it was time to move to something else, that internally I wasn't ready to give up on this or to stop talking about it. And realistically, it's just the expansion of it. Everything I do is the expansion of All Boys Aren't Blue.
For sure.
The next book deals, because there'll probably be 2 of them announced within the next 6 weeks, like, those two books, they don't happen if I didn't write All Boys Aren't Blue. So, so All Boys Aren't Blue has become my gateway through that,
Nice.
right? So I'll never move on from it. I'll just keep expanding on it. We'll keep creating from it. And eventually there will be a TV show or a movie about it. And, and then I'll make more stuff about more queer stuff. And, and that's just how it is. I'll make podcasts and I'll do this and I'll do that, right? So that's how I see it. I don't just see it as like this singular thing that I'm stuck on. I see it as like a thing that just is going to keep expanding and keep building. Even if that becomes my flagship thing.
That works, right?
Yeah.
Making that huge difference in the world feels pretty good. Yeah, that's awesome. So, you said you have some announcements. So I know that we can, people want to find you on Twitter and your Instagram, and where can people find you? All of that good news.
Yeah, it's I am GM Johnson on Twitter, on Instagram, and on TikTok, which I'm still figuring out. Everybody, my skin looks great and all those things, and I'm very, very blessed, but I am not in my 20s. No longer in my 20s. So I was born when social media was just to be social. So
I was born before it ever existed, so it's hard for me.
Give me some time. As the TikTok thing. But yeah, and then George Matthew Johnson on Facebook, because I do keep Facebook, because that's like family and everybody else.
Sure.
I always got to keep the Facebook open. But yeah, that's where everybody can find me.
That's great. And tell us, like, is there anything that you would want to say to our listeners to, like, obviously your messages are in your books, but we've got you here live in person. I always like to ask, is there any message you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think at every point in history, we reach these moments of great fear and great strife, is this the end of the world? I think every generation has had that moment of, oh my God, this might be the end of the world. And it's okay to feel that way. But try not to live in that. One of the, I think when I think about my ancestors, I know a lot of them lived on hope, but a lot of their creativity came out of hopelessness. And so don't always be afraid to feel hopeless, because out of hopelessness oftentimes is what drives us to do a thing and to create a thing and to move forward on something. It's like when Black people say you made a way out of no way. Like, to feel like you had no way and still be able to make a way is a really beautiful and powerful thing. So don't let the fear and the hopelessness of the times that we are in get you down, but let it empower you to create something even greater that keeps you up.
Yeah, I hope that you see all the, because I mean, how I always take it is the bigger the pushback, the bigger the difference you're making.
Yeah,
right? Because it has to swing that way with movements.
And
so, boy, are you freaking people out.
I mean, realistically, yeah.
Which is really fantastic.
Yeah, I mean,
it's such good news for all of us.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna keep writing, and because you can't ban all of them. So.
And again, I think the banning just makes people like me want to go buy them more and make sure kids have them in their hands. Right. So, so everybody go buy 10 copies of
All Boys Aren't Blue, and you're not broken.
And make sure you get them in the hands of especially queer Black youth who are continuing to be, I've got a 12-year-old, and the queer effeminate Black boy is always still the target, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And we know that trans Black women, average age is 32, 33, right? If they can live that long, that's a victory. So we have to be conscious humans and keep our people safe. So George, thank you. I'm just like overwhelmed that you were willing to come and talk to us. I really appreciate you being here, and for all the work you do and all the difference that you make. So
thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, thanks for listening to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. I hope you loved it. And if you did, would you take a second and go do all the things like subscribe, rate, review, tell all your friends, Apparently, if you do that, the podcast platforms are more likely to share it. And if you think these stories are important, please take 3 minutes to just go do that. I'd really appreciate it. Also, I'd love to connect with you on social. On Instagram and Facebook, I'm at the Gender Reveal Party, and on Twitter, I'm at PriorJ. It's a real joy and privilege to bring you this podcast. Come back soon. Love you, bye.